You're watching The Property Cast, powered by the award-winning Total Landlord Insurance.
Today we're going to have a look at the Renters Reform (in parenthesis) Bill, which was presented to Parliament yesterday. And I've got Kate here to look at some of the elements that came out in the bill, which was published yesterday, and to get some thoughts about where we think it's going and what's in it. So, Kate, let's start off with your general views on the bill.
Everybody's talking about it as if it's going to be some massive game changer. And I remember retaliatory eviction. That was going to be stopped. I remember the Habitation Act. That was going to be some sort of game changer. So I think there's kind of two things, really. Is firstly, nobody panic because it's not in yet. And secondly, we have a long way to go before we actually know what the outcome of this bill is, because it's going to take, I mean, you're better on timings than me. How long is this going to take to go through Parliament before it actually makes a difference to a tenant or landlord? Well,
exactly, and this is the big question, because they're actually doing the second reading. So the way Parliament works is the first reading is literally they present a bill and they read out the title.
And that's done.
That took, I mean, we were watching Parliament TV after Prime Minister's question time there, and then literally 2 seconds came on and then that was moved on. But they set the date for the second reading. Oh, wow. So that will be the first opportunity that MPs will be able to get up and debate and give their views on the bill. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the reaction of the MPs are going to be on this, and on what sections they think are important to them, and what areas that they think there might be amendments or changes in there. So we know that's going to happen, and then I think they're going to try and crack on with the next stage, the committee stages and everything else. Their logic was that with a white paper that the heavy lifting had already been done, because they'd already published the details, they've been out to consultation, etc., etc. So everybody agrees it. So what's in there is everybody agrees. Well, let's wait and see, because you never know with Parliament, when MPs, and things have changed. This was mooted back in 2019, these sort of reforms, especially the eviction Section 21, and we're still not there.
Yeah. And, I mean, from my side, the biggest problem is that we already have over 168 laws. We already have over 400 rules and regulations. So, and most of those are to protect tenants. Rightly so, have no issue with that. But if after that we're still calling the rental market the Wild West, if we move to 175 laws and 500 rules and regulations, why is it going to make any difference? Because I haven't seen any extra money for enforcement. And getting rid of Section 21 is like, well, we all know on the ground in the industry, this idea that it's some nasty landlord, which will on occasion evict people just for the hell of it and to get more money, but mostly they evict them for all the reasons that are in Section 8. It's down to they haven't paid the rent, there's a social antisocial issue, or they want to move back into the home. And all I think is going to happen with getting rid of Section 21, for example, which is one of the big things it's said will make a difference, is that we'll just know that the main reason Section 21 was issued was for rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, and because the landlord wanted to sell, or a lot of them wanted to move back into the home. So all it'll do is just clarify that Section 21 was never a no-fault eviction, and it won't make any difference, just like Retaliatory Eviction Act didn't make any difference, or the Habitation Act hasn't made any difference, or indeed, going further back, although the Housing Health and Safety Rating System has made some difference, I'd still say that most landlords and some agents still have never heard of it.
Well, I do agree with some of those points, Kate, but what fundamentally, they are changing what a tenancy, a type of tenancy that's going to be available. So just like Scotland and Wales have now moved to these periodic rolling tenancies, we've got rid of the assured short hold tenancy, and we've now got the assured tenancy that, can only be for 28 days or a month. And, what is that message going to be sending out to the market?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, when this all started, this was all about security of tenancy agreement and making the tenants feel secure. So 3-year agreements, do you remember those?
Yes, yes.
And loads of them introduced in London. Really good idea. Well, now there's no security, neither for the landlord or the tenant. So for me, if I was going to, I don't know, let's rate it out of 10, I'd give it 4 or 5. How about you?
Well, for effort, I think, yeah,
effort's about
maybe 5 or 6
25.
for effort. But yes, of course, how is that going to be applied? And like everything else, you know, the more complicated you make laws, the more open they are to interpretation, the harder they are to comply to the letter of the law, and
more difficult to enforce.
And understand really. I mean, you move somebody into a property, and they say, I like that property. I like the little schools there. I've got a 3-year-old toddler, nice nursery school, there's a nice primary school, and you'll say, well, actually, we're only going to be able to give you a 1-month tenancy, and at any time I can give you 2 months' notice. I'll have to give you a reason, but, you know, you could be given that 2-month notice. You're not going to feel that security. I do understand that.
I just don't think it delivers what tenants or landlords need for a good functioning PRS
Okay,
market.
so I think we might have some kickback from both sides of the equation. You know, those people that you know, are behind the market will say, well, actually, this doesn't work, especially in things like students, and you'll get some of the tenant groups saying, well, you know, we need longer notice periods or a more security of tenure. Now, you know,
and you'd think after 4 years they'd have worked that out.
And yeah, I think you're right. Like, if you're going to bring in a law, you know, you want to make things better, in my view, you know, and improve a situation and build relationships. If you bring something in where you're actually going to divide people, I think that's going to be a big question. Now, their intention is not in that, and if you read very carefully,
I get that, but
they are trying to harmonise this and get that together.
But I think they've really failed on that front.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and see, you know, how it's applied. But you're right. I mean, there is a potential there that it could become very fractious.
You're watching The Property Cast, powered by the award-winning Total Landlord Insurance.
What would work best?
I think the bit that I like is the portal.
Yes.
And I know that's only like a small part of it, but the reason I like that is that you've got Rent Smart Wales, and you've got all the information in that one place. And is it Rent Scotland, I think it is, or they might have changed that. You've got everything everybody needs in one place. What I find horrifying, and I saw this online the other day, is that people are still renting properties without any research whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's like we have a huge percentage of people out there driving cars because they didn't know they needed a driving licence, let alone an MOT. And we still have that in our sector. So I like the idea there's one portal because it makes it very easy for the media to send everybody to. Good for citizens' advice, good for Shelter, all of the charities, because there'll be good information in there, so that will cut down potentially the costs of the charities having to fund good content, and we'll get a consistency of what the rules and regulations are, which if you go onto the landlord forums, you ask some of the questions and it's scary what the answers are.
Yeah.
And those answers are sometimes more scary than the fact that somebody thinks that it's okay to ask that question on a Facebook page.
I think the scary thing is that I've been doing this for 30 years, and you think, oh my God, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, look, I'm agnostic a bit. No, tell a lie, I'm not agnostic. One day I'm really excited about this. Yeah, one day I'm really excited about this and the application of technology, and then, you know, a reality check may come in and think, oh God, how many times have we seen, you know, technological solutions that have fallen foul. So we really got to see the detail. Yeah. And look, they've been working on this for a long time behind the scenes. They commissioned an organisation to do a full study into that. We've not seen the results of this, and I certainly will be pressing to see what their research has come out on the portal. It could potentially be very, very exciting and join up.
If we can get everybody renting right from the start, be they a tenant or a landlord, that is actually the biggest win. Because with or without these reforms, if you do everything right as a tenant and you do everything right as a landlord, then and an agent, there are no problems. Yeah, it's a pretty good sector. You know, if you rent through a decent agent and let through a decent agent, the likelihood of anybody getting evicted is tiny. The likelihood of you having a problem is small because they all do it right. And the portal has the potential to get everybody renting right, and the right information out there. But I think as far as a lot of the other things, I don't think Section 21 will make any difference at all, because it was never a no-fault eviction, or very rarely. And I look at some of the other things. I like the idea of a decent home standard, because we wanted the property MOT. I just wish they'd gone a lot further. And I think that's my sadness with this, is they could have gone a lot further.
Yeah, okay.
And my problem with all these laws, they come in too late.
Yes.
So HMO licensing, this is almost what's going in the rent reform, has already been tested with HMO licensing, and it's failed.
Right.
It's cost an awful lot of money, but I think I saw a stat from a great organisation called Safer Renting that deal with very horrendous letting issues, and they said that there's something like in London, in each borough, there's 2.2 people enforcing 10,000 PRS properties.
No,
and the cost versus the actual prosecutions takes too long, and it costs too much money. And worse still, because we have no stock, of which this will have no impact on, or very little stock left in most areas, then the problem that tenants got is, well, fine, they can come out of the property quicker if they don't like the landlord or the property, but they've got nowhere to go. And the only place they've got to go is to queue up next to, what was it, Arla's 27 other households trying to get to a property. So when you're in, I think, a stock shortage situation, it doesn't matter how many laws you introduce, it's not going to solve the actual problem.
And absolutely, and one of the disappointing things about the legislation is its lack of detail on certain sections.
You're watching The Property Cast, powered by the award-winning Total Landlord Insurance.
We go back to stock. Oh, what's the solution? Build more houses. But that's not as simple as build more houses,
We've been
is
saying
it?
it for 30 years and completely not succeeded. Or I was thinking, actually, on the way down to see you, all of those city centre flats that were built, and in Nottingham, we've got a ton of them, they're still not enough. That's what's quite scary, is the scale. And I worry that MPs and governments are focusing on the PRS, even the likes of Shelter, focusing on the PRS, because actually the big housing crisis is nothing to do necessarily with the private sector, but that MPs, the likes of Shelter, etc., don't think they can solve. And I've been thinking, we've always said, oh, there's a housing crisis, but nobody ever says what it is. So I've just decided and looked at the numbers and thought, right, we're short 1 million to 1.5 million homes in the social sector. Let's be clear, that means government, local authorities, mayors, planners literally, I owe you a social home to over 1 million and up to 1.5 million households, depending on who you believe. If we built them the social homes that they needed, took out the 1 million people in the private rented sector that are on benefits, and of course have their what they can pay for rent capped because of the local housing allowance, well, suddenly you've freed up 1 million homes in the private sector, which means tenants won't have to worry and first-time buyers can get back onto the market. So for me, we're focusing all the housing crisis on fixing the private sector, and what nobody's doing, which I want a weekly assessment of every MP, what is your affordable housing shortage, and what are you doing to get rid of it? Because if we don't have somebody focused on that, actually we'll never get out the housing crisis, because the aim is to fix house building through the private sector and get them to fund social housing effectively, and the aim is to fix the PRS, which have now resulted in the biggest stock shortage we've ever had in 20 years. All they've done is hurt tenants.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And now what are they going to do? So for me, when we're focusing on the rent reform, what we're not doing is focusing on the real problem, which is these horrendous affordable housing waiting lists. And I worry that MPs think they can't solve it, so they're playing around with the private sector and blaming the private sector so that nobody talks about it. And that's my biggest fear, is that all of these reforms won't work until we solve that problem.
I totally agree. I mean, I think it has to be a collaborative approach. I mean, the Secretary of State has written to certain councils and put them on the naughty step, saying, "Why haven't you built enough?"
The idea of a council being on a naughty step.
Yeah, but what I haven't seen, is that it's them working together to come up with solutions on how to actually how to deal with that.
Absolutely. I mean, one part of my background is I built the self-build and renovation centre in Swindon. Everybody loves grant designs. We have all these PRS guys now, and I think Hampton's came out with a stat that 450,000 of them could be in trouble financially because of the rise in mortgage rates. What if we got them to, and the money that the private sector has, to build 1 or 2 houses a year? We've got 2 million landlords. What if we could incentivise 50,000 landlords or property investors to build 2 homes to hand over to the council for the next 25 years? And the council could work with them at a local level to find that land for them, or hand them over to, say, I don't know, as a property developer, we're giving you these private investors, they're going to build and pay for the social homes. That's 100,000 homes a year. So even if it was 50,000 homes a year, that's a big way of smashing that 300,000 target. Yeah. And that's, I think, again, the biggest thing that they've missed here is if they'd worked with the private sector, which is already housing 1 million people on benefits and already has taken the strain from the lack of social homes that government, local authorities and planners, mayors have failed to provide people that they owe them, that could have worked. We could be sitting here in a completely different situation now. And that's where I get really sort of sad, cross on my high horse. Because if you don't identify what a problem is, the real problem, you're not going to fix it. And that's why we're in the state we're in for the last 30 years. And this rent reform bill is not doing a thing to solve the real problem.
You're watching The Property Cast, powered by the award-winning Total Landlord Insurance.
What do you say to landlords, agents, the sector out there? How should they be preparing for this without actually, going into knee-jerk reactions and making the wrong decision for themselves and for their tenants and for the industry in general? So what advice have you got to weather this period of uncertainty?
And tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think if you're a decent landlord with legally and safely let properties, if you're a decent agent that lets legally and safely let properties, you have nothing to fear. The only issue is, and I'm fairly confident they'll solve it because it will be a disaster otherwise, is the issue for the student market. I think if they can solve that, then actually the majority of landlords and agents don't have to worry. I do think the biggest problem they've got is going to be the rise in homelessness. And that's the biggest issue. And I'm not sure that the government or anybody has quite understood that if somebody's evicted with a Section 21, which I had to do because not hard drugs, it was weed, that's what my tenant was doing and that was causing problem for others. So we issued a Section 21, single mum, rehoused by the council. My understanding under the new rules, I'll have to blame her for that. And as a result, she won't get homed. So that's kind of the
unforeseen consequence.
It's not unforeseen because we've told them about it till they're blue in the face. It's just that nobody's given me an answer.
No.
So that I think is, I think that nobody needs to worry if you're doing a good job now. Apart from the student bit, I think that they will solve that. We already know places like Edinburgh, York, is it Liverpool, I think, as well. They can't guarantee student places now.
Yeah.
We'll get accommodation, which is what you always had. So I think that student thing will have to be solved because otherwise that will be a big problem. And once that's done, I actually think most people don't need to worry.
Yeah.
Because, there's new ways of putting up rent increases, but we know actually the one thing that landlords are really bad at is doing rent increases. So now they're going to be even worse at it because they're going to have to put a piece of paper through. My understanding is they have to put Section 13 or something like that. So things will be a little bit more complicated. And I think the other thing is you must reference absolute tenant to the hilt, because if you don't, they will be able to take advantage of you even more than the clever tenants who know the rules can now.
And ironically, referencing for tenants is beneficial to the tenant because it builds up their credit history.
Yes, of course.
And, I've always advocated that, it's almost, it should almost be mandatory that you're entitled to a reference both as a landlord and as a tenant.
Yes, and hopefully with things like the Skipton Building Society's new mortgage, that's where you can borrow this, where you can, as long as you can prove you've been paying your rent for 12 months or more, you can actually then apply for a mortgage without a deposit. So that referencing and any credit pluses that you get, that could actually help you on the ladder as well. So I think that could be a really good thing. But I think for me, that is the biggest thing that you need to worry about. Fix the student market. And good landlords, agents have very little to fear, apart from what are you going to do when you will get, I reckon it's 1 out of 5 tenancies will go bad. How are you going to protect yourself against that?
Well, my advice to everybody out there is this is not going to happen overnight, but it is coming. And as we go along the journey, we will get more and more information. So stay up to date, which is really, really important. This is not something you should be ignoring.
No, absolutely.
Okay? But don't overreact or panic. Get the right advice. Okay? And one of the advantages of the period of time that we've now got is that
plenty of time.
You could come back and we can talk about more of this in detail as it comes out. But thank you everybody for your time, and we'll see you next time.
You've been watching the Property Cast, powered by the award-winning Total Landlord Insurance. For more, please visit totallandlordinsurance.co.uk.